folks, this is a really interesting story. There's quite a bit of video here, but I think it's worth playing. So Jill Stein went on the Tavis Smiley radio show. Now, just to set this up, Tavis Smiley started this election cycle supporting Cornel West when he thought Cornel West was going to run with the Greens. So Tavis Smiley, in recent years anyway, I don't know much about his background overall. Not the Democrat hack that you would expect from mainstream media. He's been friendly towards the Greens. And the DNC caught wind that he was interviewing Jill Stein, and so they sent him a list of questions that they suggested he asked her. So let's take a look at this.
I'm doing this not because I mean to put you on the defensive at the outset of the conversation. I'm doing it because I've already shared with our audience 2 hours ago when I first came on the air today that in the middle of the night last night, I received an email from the DNC. It came from a private email. It did not come from a DNC email, as I typically receive. I would not name the person who sent the email, but it came to me from a DNC official. And let me just read what this email says. I am reaching out from the DNC because it is my understanding that Tavis Smiley will be interviewing Jill Stein this week. I wanted to put a few things of note on your radar screen for it being, of course, the conversation. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you. And so there are about 5 or 6 things here that the DNC evidently wants me to ask Jill Stein. So in full transparency, these are not my questions to start this conversation. These are from the DNC, and I want to give Dr. Jill Stein a chance to respond to them. And maybe we'll get into some conversation about what it means that the DNC is tracking this thing the way they are to send me questions to ask Dr. Jill Stein. I'll leave that, as my grandmother, Big Mama said, we're going to leave that lay where the good Lord done flung it. I'm going to leave it right where it is, and I'll let you process that for yourself. But these are the things that the Democratic Party wants me to ask of Dr. Jill Stein. The first thing on the list, no surprise, Dr. Stein, I quote from this email. This week, the New York Times reported that even Jill Stein's family doesn't want her to run because of the risk her candidacy poses in helping to send Donald Trump back to the White House. Your response.
I can be sure.
Okay, so I cut to the end of her response. As we know, Jill can monologue for a while. In the interest of time, we don't have to hear the whole answer. That's not really the point of this. So he gets an email from a DNC official with a list of questions that they want him to ask Jill Stein. He goes ahead and he asks every question on the list while acting as if he's defying them, but not defying them.
Right.
It's very bizarre. I really think
weird.
he felt his
weird.
job was threatened if he didn't read these questions. And here, I'll let this play a little more, and then we'll pause one more time.
That the DNC had a role in that New York Times article and in every other article. Because if they are basically telling you, instructing you as a journalist on what you should be saying in this interview, that is absolutely outrage. This is an all-out assault on freedom of the press and freedom of speech. This is the opposite of censorship. This is actually election interference and distortion through the press.
Let me correct just one thing. DNC trying to tell Tavis.
Exactly. Let's affirm that
to tell Tavis,
and give a big shout out here to Tavis Smiley.
But you are,
Blanche.
I ain't the one.
You are.
You send it to me. I'm going to out you for sending it to me, and you better be glad I didn't call your name. And the folk who are copied inside the DNC on the email that was sent to me. That's the dumb part. You send it to me, and then you copy people inside the DNC. Not very smart. But this is what you get when you send stuff to me like this and think I'm going to play your game.
You are playing their game.
But you are playing it.
You're asking them every question they wanted. You're asking her every question they wanted you to ask her, and you're making this show of protest.
And you're not naming names.
And you're not naming names. And you're not naming, you are playing their game. He, I think, really felt that they were going to get him fired if he didn't ask her what they said. Because Tavis, so then you would say, because Russell, you talked to me about this last night when we were prepping this segment, you say, well, I mean, why, if he was worried about his job, why wouldn't he just ask the questions and not make a public protest of it? And the answer is because he has a reputation of being sympathetic to the Greens. So it would have looked too strange if he had brought Jill on and asked her all these hatchet man questions. So he has to make this public show of like, you tried to get me to play along, but you failed. How did you fail? You're reading every question that they want you to ask her, and you're not naming names who sent you the email. So like you're playing along and acting like you're not playing along by putting on this little protest act. It's very, very bizarre. I can't say I blame him because as he brings up, he references the 2 black radio hosts who were fired when they asked Joe Biden tough questions. I think he literally feared for his job. I think he feared he will be fired if he doesn't ask. So what do? I can't not ask because then I'll get fired. I can't ask as if I really care about these questions because people know me as being sympathetic to Jill Stein and Green Party. I was back in Cornell West when he ran as a Green. So what did he do? He has to do this. It's really interesting. Do you have anything to add? We got a lot more video to play.
This is why, in the end, who knows what they pay for something like this. I imagine it's better than this, but you're better off as a fucking podcaster, man.
Yeah, just go independent.
Nobody tells you what to do. And he's got enough of a name that walking in the door, he'd have an audience.
Oh, yeah, he's fairly famous.
So why do this? This is talk radio. It can't be that much money.
No. And he's fairly famous. He'd do very well in our space.
Sure.
He's good at what he does. He's talented. He's likable.
So
he's smart. Yeah. So why do this?
Why be in this position?
Yeah. All right. Here we go.
And I have nothing against the DNC. I am a registered Democrat, have been on my entire life. That's not the point. There were 2 other, you recall, earlier this year, there were 2 African-American hosts who both lost their jobs, one in Milwaukee, one in Philadelphia, for asking questions of then candidate Joe Biden that the DNC had sent to them. And I'm just not that dude. I'm not that person. But since you sent it to me, I'll give her a chance to respond to what obviously concerns you. Issue number 2, person. Watching my time. In an interview in March that I'm again quoting from this email. In an interview in March that was recently unearthed, Jill Stein said she'd be open to pardoning Trump and convicted January 6ers. More details below, Tavis. Let me go below. Quoting from this email. When asked about, and they put this in bold, I'm going to show Jill Stein this right quick. You can't see the name.
He's asking them verbatim. That's amazing.
Bold, all caps. Yeah. Bold, all caps. When asked about pardoning January 6 rioters, Stein said that she would have to look more carefully at their actual charges and that January 6 was being blown up for political reasons. When Stein was asked if she would pardon Trump if elected, she responded, "What's he guilty of?" Going on to say that many U.S. presidents had committed war crimes as bad as Trump's financial crimes, ultimately saying she'd have to see what he was convicted of and what his sentence was. These are quotes that the DNC is bringing to my attention that you've made about potentially pardoning Donald Trump and January 6 rioters. To that, Dr. Jill Stein, you say what?
Okay, now, look, the point of this is not to beat up on Jill Stein, so I didn't include all of her answers, but I included some that I just think are a little bit too lousy to ignore as honest commentators, and this is one of them, quite frankly. I'm sorry to say. Still writing her in solidarity with the Muslims and Arabs, still voting for her, but this is not good.
So, this is totally taken out of context. That question was posed as part of a laundry list of a number of people for whom pardons might be a potential issue. And whether it was Julian Assange or Edward Snowden, I don't recall, but there were many in that list.
Well, Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, it's just a yes. I mean, the obvious answer is yes. Right. So it wouldn't depend on anything in their cases.
That were, serious contenders for pardon. So I gave a blanket answer. That everyone merits their day in court. And at the time, my recollection is that at the time, Trump had been convicted of financial crimes related to not filing campaign finance information.
Issue number 3 in this email.
Right, so the correct answer there is obviously the January 6 protesters were overcharged and oversentenced. So you might have to look at specifics about who deserves a full pardon, because if someone committed an act of violence or whatever, then you might not want to fully pardon them. But they were all overcharged and way oversentenced. Right. And so you should at least just say that. Instead, she just punts on the issue entirely, which I think is a weak move. And why are you including Julian Assange and Edward Snowden in the list of cases you'd have to look at? Those are no-brainer pardons, right? So, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't love that. I don't love that.
I quote from the email from the DNC. Earlier this month, she, Jill Stein, told Newsweek falsely that she was not taking GOP help in this race. We put out a statement, we being the DNC apparently, put out a statement noting how false that was with more background here. There's a link in this email for me to see the background. Then we learned this week that she, in fact, paid a lawyer who was involved in cases to overturn the 2020 election results, Dr. Jill Stein.
Okay. So that answer was not important. Go on. Question number 4 from the DNC. He reads every single one.
Number 4, raised in this email to me from the DNC. I quote, last week, Stein was endorsed by David Duke. David Duke, who said that he made the endorsement after thinking about, quote, what's good for white people, Europeans, close quote. What say you about being endorsed by David Duke?
Now, her answer to this
no, because her policies are clearly in line with David Duke's ideas.
Yeah.
That was not a troll in any way.
Well, this is what's so ridiculous about her answer. Her answer to this is just
we got some of that
crazy.
in on Twitter when we announced we were going to interview her. Yeah, she was endorsed by David Duke.
Oh yeah, right.
How fucking stupid are you? How stupid are you?
But her answer
here, she's right in line with David Duke.
I gotta say though, her answer here, it's very short, but it's pretty dumb as well.
What if David Duke endorsed Kamala? Would you talk about that?
Yeah, right.
Would you bring that up?
Look, there's a reason why I think her answer here is important.
Europeans, close quote. What say you about being endorsed by David Duke?
Apparently he didn't know that I'm Jewish. And who put him up to this is what I'd like to know. And of course, we rejected that out of hand.
Okay. Of course he knows you're Jewish. Your name is Stein. The guy's a lifelong anti-Semite. I'm sure he knows all the Jew names. He knows Stein is Jewish. He knows you're Jewish. He did it as a troll, and this speaks to a weakness of the Green Party. I'm sorry I have to say. All right? As constructive criticism. Frame it that way if it helps you. He knows you're Jewish. He endorsed you as a troll because David Duke wants Donald Trump to win, but he knows his endorsement would be a liability to Donald Trump if he endorsed Donald Trump. So what does he do? As a troll, he endorses the left-wing candidate who he sees as being helpful to Donald Trump because you take votes from Kamala. But of course, Jill Stein is afraid to embrace the fact that she's taking votes from Kamala. She feels this need to apologize for that for some fucking crazy reason. And so she has to make up that he didn't know I was Jewish. Oh, is that cringe? Oh, is that cringe? But the reason she has to twist herself in a pretzel to make that obviously absurd formulation is because she's afraid to just lean into the idea that she's taking votes from Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I don't know.
Why?
Yeah, I don't know if it's that they live with the illusion that they're going to win over Democrats. They're only fertile territory for expansion are the great mass of people, almost half the public, that don't vote.
Exactly.
That's where your votes are getting. You're never winning them over. You're never winning them over. They're mad at Elizabeth Warren.
Right.
These people. They're gonna go green.
Right.
Get out of it. Burn their whole shit down.
Exactly.
Revel in it. You should be the Joker with the match and the kerosene with them.
Right. Exactly. All right, here's question number 5. Last one.
Okay. Issue number 5 on this issue, this email from the DNC. Stein has repeatedly said she has no regrets about being a spoiler in the 2016 election, even after everything Trump did in office. See background below, and there's all kind of background below to make this particular point. Finally here, as I said, to close this circle, I referenced this New York Times article that I read that you have not read.
This is amazing.
That the DNC put as
this
their
is the
first
cherry
point
on
that they
top
wanted me to ask you about regarding your family. This is the exact quote I was referencing when I mentioned your son who was quoted in the article. One of Ms. Stein's, I'm reading now from the email. One of Ms. Stein's adult sons said in an interview, Tavis, asking not to be identified by name to avoid any personal or professional repercussions from associating with her. Here's the quote from one of your adult sons. Quote, when she told us she was going to run again back in October 2023, we asked her not to, close quote. That is the quote. That was in the New York Times. I read the story. a few days ago about the headline was something like Jill Stein says she's not getting out of the race no matter who asks her, and that quote from one of her adult sons was in the piece. We've already addressed it. I just wanted to give the exact quote so people wouldn't say I paraphrase, because that's what I was doing until I found my notes. Now, that's it.
Okay, so okay, I'll let this play.
Dr. Jill Stein is here for the rest of this hour. When we come forward, enough of the defense. I will let her go on offense.
I'll let her go on offense. I'll let her ask the questions I would have asked. I spent the first half hour doing the DNC the favor that they probably threatened my job if I didn't do for them. For those who missed what he did at the end there, so he asked the 5 hit piece questions, then back and read an exact quote from the first question that he didn't get to read when he asked it because he misarranged his notes.
Sure not to miss a word.
Exactly. He went back even after she already answered the first question and made sure he read exactly what they wanted him to read.
Yeah.
5 questions later. Tell me that's not a guy who was afraid they were going to fire him if he didn't read that question. Tell me that was not a hostage tape. That's amazing. And all the while he's doing this, he's acting like he's taking a stand against him, quote for quote, word for word, reading it off a list. I mean, that is
okay.
amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, I really think that was his way of trying to convince himself that they didn't take his nuts and put it in a jar. Well, I'll read them, but I'm going to tell people I'm reading them.
Yeah.
See? You don't own me.
Well, he had to do that to save face with his audience because he doesn't have a reputation as a Democrat hatchet man.
Right. Yeah.
So if he just came out and asked her about David Duke and how her brother doesn't want her to run or whatever, people would see that something's off. They'd be like, wait a minute, this is out of character for you. Something's wrong. So he has to put in the disclaimer that he's basically being coerced into asking these questions. And then he goes along as if he's taking a stand. Jill Stein says, yeah, they tried to cuck you into asking me these, but thanks for taking a stand. Meanwhile, he reads every single one.
Yeah, right. Verbatim. And then goes back at the end and makes sure he didn't miss something. Sure he gets all of it in.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that is wild.
I mean, if Jill Stein had the kind of wicked sense of humor that we appreciate, she when being presented with that quote from her son would have gotten very grave and said, truth is, you've been in and out of drug rehab.
Yeah, right.
We've tried to help him get off the horse.
Exactly.
But he's got that monkey on his back.
Right.
But she would never do that.
No. She could have thrown him under the bus if she had our sense of humor. But of course, the other question is, what is the DNC doing asking? I mean, you really see a level of panic about Jill Stein that we didn't even see in 2016 because they were so confident going into 2016. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, they were annoyed by Jill Stein, but they kind of assumed they'd win anyway.
They ignored her.
So you didn't really see this level of hysteria. Right. Now they're emailing Tavis Smiley, and he mentions on air that the 2 other black hosts got fired for asking Biden tough questions. So I don't know that they probably didn't, because that would be a major scandal if it ever got out there. I'm sure they didn't type in as many words. Your career as a talk radio host is over if you don't ask her this. But he definitely got that message. He was definitely under that impression. There's no question in my mind about that.
Please clap.